Canadians are having a hard time making ends meet. Housing crisis, fentanyl crisis, crime crisis, all kinds of problems that have happened ever since the far left took over our government. Now, on top of all of the other issues, we have the Senate trying to shut down the oil and gas industry. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Anyone who follows along with Canadian news, Canadian politics, knows that we have a federal government that is trying very desperately to harm many of the industries inside of Canada. They want to push the Canadian population down. They want to create a ruling class and everybody else to be dirt poor. They are actively trying to make this country look like it does in all of the third world. Now, we have a system in Canada that is designed to stop some of this kind of problems. We have the Senate and we have the House of Commons. For those of you that are not aware, traditionally what would happen before the United States of America, there was only kings. And in England, the people of England had a revolt and they said, it's enough. We're not taking any more of your abuse. We want representation, which incidentally is the real reason behind the American Revolution. The king said, yeah, but if you have representation, who's looking after my end? Who's watching my end? And so what we have is a system that developed where the Senate, known in England as the House of Lords, known in Canada as the Red Chamber, red for the royal color, and we have the House of Commons, literally meaning the House of Commoners, of regular, ordinary, everyday people, which is green, because they never had a building to meet in, so they would have to meet out in the middle of the field. I'm not exaggerating. That's the facts. We are supposed to have the Senate approve everything, go through all of our stuff and make sure that the people are being looked after, because ultimately the way that people are being treated reflects poorly on the king. The Governor General represents the king inside of Canada. Now that we've had that little brief understanding of the parliamentary system in Canada, you can understand why it is a bad look for the House of Commons and the Senate to be pushing forward the same net zero agenda, which the entire world has agreed is causing economic destruction, is not improving the standard of living for any people all around, and that none of the third world countries, and I mean absolutely zero of the third world countries and at least 75% of the first world countries that signed on to the Paris Accords, are trying to emulate. Yet we get these fanatics who, for one reason or another, try to tell everybody that they should, though they don't have any of the real world problems that you and I have, they should have the right to tell you how to live. Now, before I get into this senator and her new introduction, or the introduction again of a bill that was shut down because of the prorogue of Parliament, not because it was voted down with common sense. Before I start that, I'm trying to grow this channel, so if you would subscribe, hit the notification bell, I would appreciate it. Anybody out there who's aware of Mark Carney's book Values and has taken the time to even understand what it's about knows that he's an extremist when it comes to the carbon footprint. Now, it's a little touch and go. He wants you to do without, and then he wants to be the only one to capitalize on all of the industry that is based on net zero or based on fossil fuels or based on anything that's not considered, in his view, green. Now, I hate to admit it, but I have read it. I mean, I shouldn't say I hate to admit it, but I have read it so that you don't have to. And I can tell you that it's called Values because what he wants you to do is change what you value. You're out there thinking, well, I value a nice pair of shoes. I like a good haircut. I like a fancy car. None of those things does he want you to value. He wants you to value how much carbon is in a product before you decide whether or not you're going to buy it or whether or not you're going to pass it by, which is why I tried to warn all of you during the election, because many of you that vote for the Liberal Party are going to be the hardest hit by the net zero. The carbon footprint of all makeup, for example, is pretty high. The carbon footprint for all yoga pants, pretty high. The carbon footprint for all hair products, pretty high. Now, I don't use any of those things. So which one of us do you feel like the carbon product is going to be hitting us harder? But they don't tell you that. I'm the only one who's going to be telling you that. Those of us that are sitting in the center who are not going to get extreme on either side of the coin. I will, however, say from the center that technically I'm center right, because you have to balance your books. You need money. None of this happens without money. I mean, most of the poor countries, the people don't even have shoes. How's that working? Mark Carney wants you to say, it's okay, I will give up all of those luxuries if it means that the tiny little population of Canada can change the temperature of the earth by 1 degrees centigrade, which I suppose China will just fill up rather quickly, or Asia, I should say, rather than just being specific about one country. We now have 3 people in our Liberal government who are net zero fanatics. They want to make, well, I mean, think about the idea that these are the guys that approved the building of the cricket factory in central Ontario. These are the guys who are trying to tell you that we don't need a car industry. We can simply drive around on battery powers in the dead of winter without any infrastructure to plug it in, ignoring all of the raw material, like the amount of metal that goes into a battery. Nonetheless, they don't want you to know the truth. They only want to terrify you with stuff and scare you and make you afraid. Well, now we have a senator trying to do the same thing. And she put this bill forward last time, where in Mark Carney's book, he talks about, and he has verbally said it out loud, but he feels that you should be choking out companies that don't follow his green agenda, not anybody else's green agenda. Because remember, it's still speculation. There's no actual, I mean, we know that you put certain stuff in the water, it turns it bad. But we have no proof that Canada can do anything to impact the carbon footprint of this planet. We know that in the Middle East, they're cranking out oil by the millions of barrels. Doesn't seem to stop him. We know that in Norway, they're cranking out millions of barrels of oil. We know that they're mining all over the place. We know that everywhere except in Canada, there's no issue or no concern or no problem about having these industries up and running so that they can create wealth, generate income. With that income, then we can utilize and develop technologies to clean the stuff. Now, the Liberals don't want to tell you that they sell massive amounts of coal. If they were truly being green, the first thing they would do is shut down the coal industry. Now, I hear you guys out there saying, no, coal is clean. Really, it's not. It comes out of the ground the same way it has since the beginning of time. But we invested in technology to clean it up. It's a different story. Let's stay focused on this senator. So here she is from the Senate itself, the biography. Rosa Galvez, originally from Peru, is one of Canada's leading experts in pollution control and its effect on human health. She has a PhD in environmental engineering from McGill and was a professor of the University of Laval for 25 years, heading the civil and water engineering department. You ever heard that term, those who can't do teach? So I don't know why we were calling her Canada's leading expert. She's got a degree from McGill and went to school teaching for 25 years. And then now it goes on to say that all kinds of things that I don't necessarily think are relevant. What is relevant to you and I is she published several policy papers, including a discussion paper on Canada's building codes, which is right up what Carney's been trying to talk about. So she's really, right in Carney, like her and Carney are joined at the hip when it comes to this kind of thing, which is a problem for me outside of the idea that this book is full of, this book is, you can't even imagine how incorrect this book is when it comes to the economic forecasts and the economic models that Mark Carney puts forward. However, if he is the one who writing the book and she's following the policies from the book, how much of an outsider can he really be considered? Now he has people in the House of Commons and in the Senate spewing this nonsense. Building codes in Canada have been put there for one specific reason: to keep you warm in the winter. She further went on and wrote a white paper on a clean and just recovery from the lockdown. In March 2022, she published a white paper on aligning Canada's finance with climate commitment, which of course is a big section of this book. That's exactly what the point is the values is supposed to be about how we spend money on carbon footprint, and anybody who's lending money to people who might not be doing the extreme net zero stuff that you hear Mark Carney talking about, which is kind of ridiculous because you can get out of doing all that extreme stuff if you simply pay money. I still have yet to hear from the Liberal government where the Mother Earth collects all that money. Maybe they dump it in a volcano. I don't know. Maybe they ship it off to Peru. I don't really know. I do understand that by telling me that somehow a company can pay a fine, that's going to clean the air. I don't know that I agree with that. Which led to the introduction of Bill S-243. Now, for those of you that are not aware, when we have a C bill, it comes out of the Commons, Canada. We have an S bill, it comes out of the Senate of Canada. The bill is called Climate Aligned Finance Act, legislation to help guide Canada's financial sector in its transition to a net zero economy. So here we see some of the problem with the fire left. She thinks because she taught at a university about pollution and how it affects human health, she has the right to decide how finance works. And this book and her bill is trying to tell you that these guys know how to make the check balance and that they're going to force companies. That's why Mark Carney's recent bailout of the steel and aluminum industry is only for large industry. He doesn't want any small industry coming forward because he can't ensure that you will go carbon zero. He can do that with these couple of companies, and they're going to destroy the industry flat out. I mean, Mark Carney's policies out of this book and this lady's legislation are going to take us back 2,000 years to when the king controlled everything, including what you did for a living, all the fish in the water, all the deer in the forests. I invite you to read Robin Hood if you want to understand exactly how bad it was. Of course, they don't want you to appreciate that. You're out there telling yourself, well, that couldn't happen nowadays, and yet here we see it happening all around us. We know that Mark Carney started that organization called G-Fans, where he got together, like his GFANZ, where it was a net zero. He did it in Glasgow, and he had like $1 trillion of industry, like 40% of the Western world's money. That, of course, abandoned ship when Donald Trump took office. They all said, no way. So he has, I think there's one bank out of Canada's 6 that is still on board, and there's none of the American banks. And of the group that he had coming out of North America, only the guy who owns Bloomberg, he's the only one that's got is still on board with him. Like they probably can text one another. They're that kind of closeness. So these guys want to tell you who can get money, right? They want to control the industry. That's why I keep telling you that I don't believe that Mark Carney's trying to solve this problem with Donald Trump, because the more industry that gets shut down, the more he can take control of the people that are left over, and the more he can take your tax dollars and give it to them so that they'll do exactly what he wants, much like 1930s Germany, much like modern day China, much like 1920s Italy. I mean, there's an economic model there, and he talks about all of these things in his book about how, the Marxist model and all the rest of it, which is what I'm describing to you. This is the Marxist model for economy. It's joining business and government together and taking the middle class and throwing it into the garbage. There's no more middle class, see? Because you can't get small businesses off the ground, and without small businesses, you have no middle class. So in 2023, they updated the white paper, and I went ahead and got a copy of it, and I was reading through it. And then at the end, they came up with some recommendations, and these recommendations are really eye-opening. Now, oftentimes, this is like a summation, right? This is what they've gone through, and they've tried to tell you everything, and they're trying to justify it. And then after you read all of that, they say, here, this is what we believe should happen. This is a standard format. Even in my videos, I tell you everything, and then I sum it up at the end. So if you don't watch through to the end of my videos, you kind of miss a lot of the point, or at least my opinion. Here are the recommendations. All entities, including financial institutions, must be aligned with climate commitments. Not if you feel like it, not in a democratic process. No. This lady, who is spent her whole life as a university professor, feels like she has the right to tell you how you feel about various climate issues. That's not arrogant to the extreme, is it? Sounds like it's normal for her to come out of nowhere and try to tell people living in the north they shouldn't lend money to somebody who wants to start an industry selling snowmobiles or manufacturing something other than gas stoves, because it doesn't align with a climate commitment. Avoidance of carbon lock-in. the entrenchment of our dependence on fossil fuels must be considered in all financial decisions. Every last one of them, eh? You figure they're using a lot of electric dump trucks to haul out much of these materials that we're using that we're smelting and pouring to create these batteries. You figure that that's being done with batteries. Is that the idea? You feel that electricity, which can't stand any resistance at all, is the thing we're digging out of the ground with? I mean, university professor you may well have been, but something tells me that your real world experience is extremely lacking. And if you want to be talking to people about what they should and shouldn't consider in their financial decisions, I suggest that what you do is remove all of the fossil fuels out of your life. And that'll be anything that's not made of wool or cotton. That's going to be a car. It's going to be a refrigerator, electricity, your cell phone. I mean, the list of things that are provided to you by the convenience of fossil fuels is extreme. So if you can go ahead and live in a tent with your family and your husband and all the rest of it and your dog and fish, whatever it is, for 6 months, perhaps then we can give you some credit or some credibility in some of these recommendations. But something tells me that this is the kind of thing you want other people to do. You yourself, however, are going to be firing up your 3 air conditioners in your house while your kids all have, computers running and cell phones running and the 4 cars in the garage and so on and so forth. Just it's a speculation on my part, but I'm sticking with it. Recommendation number 3, require responsible target setting and planning, including compliance with the global carbon budget consistent with Paris agreements of 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature goal and mandatory consideration of all life cycle emissions. My. What that means is she's also one of these people that thinks we shouldn't have cows. Capital requirements must account for systemic climate risks generated by the activities of financial institutions. Wow, she just wants to not have any money invested in anything other than, I'm not sure, kites, perhaps. I'm not sure what she feels that these people are going, like most of the world has abandoned the climate agreement, and those of them that are still on it have changed the years. They've gone from 35 to 50. China is like 60 or 75 or something like that, like 2075. They plan on trying to do their best to get the emissions down while they fire up coal-fired plants 2 a week to generate electricity. I mean, where does this individual feel that all of these things are going to happen? I mean, think of the limitations that she's trying to put on every single solitary financial network in the world, but absolutely inside of Canada. So if you're sitting out there right now and you work for the RBC and you've got some money invested in a pipeline, or if you have Brookfield stock, if you have your pension fund wrapped up in Brookfield, who owns the 2 largest pipelines in North America, as well as the largest pipeline in South America, in Brazil, nope, not allowed to have pension funds. Can't invest in that kind of stuff. So you got to pull all that out of there. Forget about it. You got to pull it all out, because this lady who is in the Senate after spending 25 years teaching in Laval says so. Excellent choice of a senator, this one is. Recognize climate change as a superseding interest relevant to all directors' duty, which is exactly what this book wants you to do. Never mind the rest of it. Never mind the reality of it. Never mind the facts. Never mind any of that. Just be narrow-minded and focused and become a zealot. Start frothing at the mouth. Glue yourself to the road. Avoid conflict of interest and leverage climate expertise, experience, and knowledge. I'm not even sure what that means. Are you trying to tell me that, what, you should avoid conflict of interest and hire people that are only... Like we should we'll get Greta Thunberg on the board of directors. Is that what you figure? The girl never, oh, come on, man. What would she understand? She never had to raise a family. She never had to buy a house. She never had to do any of that. What would she understand what's going on? I mean, we have to find a balance, people, not an extreme. Respect the rights of Indigenous peoples as well as environmental and social goals. All right, I'm going to say it right now. You can say First Nations, but when you say Indigenous peoples, you're talking about me. I was born here. Everybody was born somewhere, and wherever they were born, they're Indigenous to that region. First Nations, we say in Canada, because they were here first. It's pretty straightforward. Develop a comprehensive action plan to align all financial products with climate commitments. I mean, this woman is a lunatic. The idea that we are going to stop what we're doing, right? And now we have got to, okay, so where does this end, right? Because what you're talking about with fossil fuels, you're also talking about plastic. So that means that everything is going to go back to the way that it was in the 70s, and we're going to be shipping it in glass. Of course, it takes a lot of heat to manufacture glass, so I guess we would have to figure out a way to do that with electricity. Perhaps she feels like we just can run around with our little hands out like this, and this will help us. You know, this is how we'll hold our lunch. Our children go to lunch this way on their way to school. Of course, they won't be wearing anything but wool or cotton because, you know, they can't use any fossil fuel generating, right? And it'll be interesting because we won't be allowed to wash the clothes. We'll have to go down to the river like they do in, like, I don't know, India, let's say, and we'll hit it on a rock. People forget that many of the modern day conveniences that we put forward are there because they improved the standard of living. Now, if you want to go back to the 1800s where women couldn't wear pants and they spent all day long, or if you want to go to how they live in, like, say, Africa, where they walk 3 miles with a bucket on their head to the local well and then balance it on their head and come back and then use that very water to do the dishes and cook supper, then I suggest that you get on board with this piece of legislation, because that's where the only place it can go. There's no other spot for it to go. Nowhere else. There will never be enough people to say, hey, listen, it's always going to be something. It's always going to be, first it's the cars, then the cars will lead to, you know, well, why do we need our own washing machines? Why can't we just have a community washing machine? Why can't you, in this gigantic condo high density stuff, you know, there's 25 floors, so we'll just put one washing machine on the 15th floor and everybody can have a schedule. Where does it end? Oh, why? Why do we need to put televisions in everybody's houses? Why would we have that? It's hard on the environment. Don't you know what they have to do to get those materials out of Africa? What are you talking about? We can't have people having wooden furniture. Trees are, you know, over there. They're trying to become one of those carbon sinks. I mean, the list, the ramifications. It just can. If you want to understand what a no carbon lifestyle looks like, simply look at how they live in the third world, because that's what it looks like, where they have to burn dung just to warm themselves, right? Can you imagine firing that up in the middle of the winter with nowhere to go? And let's remember, we have wintertime in Canada. So northern people, what we traditionally did was bring all of the livestock into the houses with us. So you're sleeping here, you're eating here, and the cows and the chickens are pooping right there. You're all in the same house. I mean, where were you going to go? You didn't have the technology to build the houses. Well, I don't know why you figure you're going to be building by hand this massive 3-bedroom house with an ensuite and a kitchen and where are you going to it'll take you 6 years to get through that. And you're doing it Mennonite style, right? Because you can't have any carbon footprint. So there's no chainsaw, there's no electric saw, there's none of that stuff, man. You're just simply sawing away like they do in the old country, and you're twisting to drill it in, and you're going to be using wooden pegs. That's, of course, if you can get on the list to get any wood from the government after they decide that they're going to limit the amount of wood that you can have. See, that's where it will go. That's how it continues. Look where we started and look where we are, and you can see that eventually it's just going to be right down there where we're all born in a hut, in a little grass roof hut, and everybody, the rich people, will be saying, oh, aren't they quaint? Meanwhile, you and I will be like, why do they have all those things and we have nothing? But you if you don't start pointing out the madness of it, if you don't understand that what she's talking about is written in this book, it's just pages of the exact same thing. And I promise you, there's a lot of, history in there. If you want to read it, go ahead, but it's a pretty slow read, if I'll be honest. I don't think that this person is qualified to be telling me what I should do and what banks should be lending me. And I don't think this person is qualified, but she wants to enact it in law. She wants to be the one to tell any financial institution what they can invest in. See? And then Mark Carney will turn around and say, no, but the Europeans are going to buy some of our steel. Never mind the fact that since 2015, when the Liberals took over, we have a deficit of nearly $1 trillion of foreign investment. That's how much is left versus how much has come in. So if if what's come in is zero, what has left is 900 and some odd billion dollars in investment. And it all went into the States. So this is kind of the thing that we need to be telling our politicians is enough is enough is enough. We can't allow for this kind of thing to be passed through the House of Commons. We can't allow any of it to be passed through the House of Commons. Then you wonder why in Alberta they've had enough, right? Because we take the money from Alberta, we give it to everybody else, but nobody's living a better standard of living. And now with the cars going, Southern Ontario is joining arm in arm with Alberta. So I don't know necessarily I'm going to do a deeper dive on the legislation so I can really tear it to pieces. I just wanted to show you how the people who are at the top, who live in the lap of luxury, who stand to lose nothing by all of these ideas, try to push onto you an idea that they read about in a book, this one in this case, and how it won't impact them, but it will devastate the lives of you, your children, generations to come. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.